We will start today's video with an excerpt from the great scholar Jeremy Clarkson. Hold on, let me do my best Clarkson impression. Like most middle-aged people, I don't know where I was when John F. Kennedy was shot. But I do know where I was when the Air France Concorde crashed into a Paris hotel. And I know where I'll be next Friday, on board the world's only supersonic airliner as it makes its final scheduled flight from New York to London. As I step off, the temptation will be strong to say, that was one small step for man, but one giant leap backwards for mankind. When the British and French governments decided to commission a supersonic jet liner in 1962, the engineers had no clue how such a thing might be achieved. Sure, they had jet fighters up there in the stratosphere, doing more than twice the speed of sound, but these were being flown by young men with triangular torsos in G-suits. The politicians were talking about putting overweight businessmen up there in lounge suits. Friends at NASA have told me that the technological challenge of making a Mach 2.2 passenger jet was greater than putting a man on the moon. Those rocket boys get all teary-eyed about their beloved Apollos, but when you mention the Concorde, their eyes dry and they nod, slowly and reverentially. Make no mistake, Concorde was an extraordinary technological advancement, almost certainly one of the greatest. And not just technically, but politically. France and Britain couldn't even agree on how it should be spelt. They finally decided that it should end in an E, in the French style. But then Macmillan fell out with de Gaulle and dropped the letter. It was Tony Benn, the then Secretary of State for Industry, who solved the matter by declaring it would be E for England, E for Europe, and E for Entente Cordiale. Ben saved Concorde over and over again, knowing that the plane was destined to be a commercial disaster. Ben had to cajole the Treasury and the French until, on January 21st, 1976, the scheduled services began. For the first time, paying passengers could fly so fast they could watch the sun rise in the west and arrive in America before they left home. After the Paris crash and the 11th of September 2001, public confidence in Concorde dried up. I flew on it for the first time last year and couldn't believe how empty it was. There were lots of things I couldn't believe, actually, like how small the windows were and where in such a tiny fuselage they found space for such an extraordinarily well-stocked wine cellar, and how noisy it was in the back. But most of all, I couldn't believe the surge of acceleration as it cleared Cornwall and the afterburners took us past 1,000 miles per hour. Unless my children become fighter pilots, they will never know that surge. In the early 1990s, British Aerospace and Aerospatiale held secret talks about developing a 225-seat aircraft that could get across the Pacific at Mach 2.5. But when the proposed cost of such a thing worked out at £9 billion, they decided to build a double-decker bus instead. Compounding the problem is a sense that the first world has pulled so far ahead of the third, the money would be better spent helping others to catch up. For every pound spent on human advancement, there are 1,000 bleeding hearts saying the money could have been spent on the starving in Africa. I see their point. But what I cannot see is the human thirst for improvement being extinguished by the bean counters. No individual company or country could afford to develop a plane that is significantly better than Concorde, so maybe what's needed is a ring-fenced global fund for the greater good. A fund that undertakes the work business won't touch, hunting the skies for asteroids, searching the seas to find a cure for cancer, and fueling our quest to go faster and faster. Or maybe the days of mechanical speed are over. Why go to America at the speed of sound when, with an internet connection and video conferencing, you can be there at the speed of light? Why go at all? Maybe planes are about to follow in the footsteps of the horse. When the car came along, the horse didn't go away. It simply stopped being a tool and became a toy, a show jumper, a playmate for 12-year-old girls. If you can communicate instantly with anyone, anywhere, the only reason to travel is for fun, for your holidays. And given the choice of doing that at Mach 2 or for £2, I know which I would choose. Perhaps then, this is not a step backwards. Maybe Concorde dies not because it is too fast, but because in the electronic age, it is actually too slow. So how was that, y'all? Did I properly channel the booming British codger that is the great Clarkson? I'm gonna be real, that was not easy for me to do, and I will not make a habit of it. But you may be wondering, why the frick did I go on and on about a retired aircraft for the past several minutes? The answer is actually peppered within that entire anecdote. When something is extricated from the fabric of our society, then it becomes a novelty. And in the context of, well, car culture, we are encroaching upon that very same phenomenon. We live in an era where driving is, in itself, becoming more and more optional. This has manifested in both obvious and non-obvious ways. The first obvious one being that if you don't wish to own a car, you can literally download an app on your phone that lets you call a personal chauffeur at a competitive price. And if you do want to own a car, you can get one that is approaching with greater accuracy the ability to drive itself. And less obvious than all that, we live in an era where if you don't even feel like going out, you can have all of your tangible goods literally delivered to your door, further eliminating the need for car ownership. What's killing the car is not regulations, nor is it conversion to new technologies, it's a reduction in the total number of drivers. Generation Z graduated high school at the height of the pandemic, a time when many of them would have been learning how to drive or even getting their first car. And by spending 1 to 2 years staying mostly at home, they realized they don't really need a license anymore in order to have their needs met. And if they do decide eventually that they still need the freedom and flexibility of a personal vehicle, they will choose the vehicles that make driving as lazy as possible. And that is always going to be the Econoboxes because they don't require 600 or 700 horsepower in order to get from home to work and back. The only real solution to this problem, that I know of anyway, is to instill within the next generation of potential drivers that cars can be fun and thrilling and even exciting. And nothing does this better than, well, racing games. Need for Speed, The Crew, even Forza to an extent, but we don't talk about that. What these get to do is really invent scenarios in which people can learn about the history of cars and why that history is so important to the human spirit and all that jazz. Motorfest spends a ton of time talking about different car cultures from around the world, for generations young and old. Forza tries to, sometimes, but they don't always hit the mark. And Need for Speed is, well, there are two flavors of Need for Speed, and with good reason. The first flavor is car puritanism, which I salivate about on my channel, taking cars that are mostly stock, so mostly as the original engineers intended them, going on grand tours in remote locations, and duking it out with law enforcement who secretly envy that they can't be out there doing the same things without, well, getting busted by other cops. You get the idea. And the second flavor obviously being the car customization culture, which, to be fair, I did grow up with before, well, I outgrew it. No matter which of these flavors, or even any of the other aforementioned conveyances that you choose from, the point is that they all work together in order to cultivate the next generation of car enthusiasts. All of them are necessary. But even more than that, most of them are created with the same fundamental realization in mind. You cannot make a culture subsisting of only one demographic. Period. End of story. And this is the part where gamers are the problem. How about we play a game? I have a list of the most popular gaming genres in 2024. Where do you think racing games are on that list? Number 5? Number 6? No, number 9. Behind puzzle games and time wasters, idle games. That is pathetic. But how about we look at those player demographics? Puzzle games have a relative 50-50 split between men and women. Casual games like Match 3 or farming simulators have more of a 70-30 split. But what about racing games? Men outnumber women by a factor of 10 to 1. Therefore, using the bare minimum of common sense, if the number of men interested in cars dries up, then car culture is dead. But on the other hand, if you can increase the number of women, and also non-binaries, because obviously in my case, that is a huge potential market and could literally take market share away from those casual games that no one in their right mind should be convinced to play. Most game devs have already realized this. It's why Need for Speed, for instance, has more of a 50-50 split between male and female characters now than it did 20 years ago. Need for Speed also no longer sexualizes women the way they did 20 years ago. And male gamers, they hate this. A lot. A while back on Twitter, I tried defending Need for Speed Payback by saying that Lena Navarro was a good portrayal of a villain in the series. I got slammed because a lot of people, a lot of the men, hate Lena specifically for reasons I just do not understand. But when you think about the few other women who are prominent in the Need for Speed series, suddenly it begins to make sense. Because the hallmark games of the franchise, Underground 2, Most Wanted 05, Carbon, even Undercover, if not for its technical problems, they all feature actual models and actresses. Brooke Burke played Rachel Teller, Johanna Moran played Mia Townsend, Emmanuelle Vaguier played Nikki, Maggie Q played Chase Lynn, all women with prior acting or modeling backgrounds, very attractive IRL, meant entirely to entice adolescent males to pick up copies of the game, because heaven knows the writing of those games did not stand the test of time. And Lena was never meant to be any of that. She was never meant to be eye candy. She was meant to be a confident, conniving, and crafty businesswoman who came up from an impoverished background, and for some people that screams DEI, which makes people hate the game. But what y'all never stop to consider is this is going to turn away women, of which there are millions of potential gamers who can help save racing and car culture by way of proxy from its untimely demise, which is fast approaching. And no, this doesn't even get into the fact that sanctioned racing, something which I don't care for normally, is almost entirely a gentleman's club, no girls allowed 90% of the time, see Grid 2 and how well that went over. Now, where do I fit into all this? See, I am a contender for World's Fastest Transgender Architect, which, if you haven't heard by now, is in fact a Grand Tour reference. Shoutouts to Richard Hammond. My goal is to capture that aspect of the market. It is my desire to make content that is friendlier to women, and of course to non-binary and other trans people. Because I don't see anybody else in the YouTube racing game scene doing any of that. If you open up a video by Sid, or by Pantha, or by Militia Gaming, always starts with the "What's up guys, what's up bros, what's up mates?" Do y'all ever get tired of being a sausage fest? Or are y'all just afraid that having even a sliver of estrogen in car culture is going to shrivel up your precious testosterone? I literally hate this. I literally do. And the worst part, I feel, is that the algo does not help. Because in spite of making my stuff girly and throwing out as many inclusivity tags as I can, the algo still puts my content at a 92% male audience, most of whom then dislike my videos because I'm a trans girl on the internet. What are we gonna do about this? I do not wish to see car culture die. I grew up around cars. I was ecstatic when I first got my license. I bend over backwards to take care of my own car IRL, which, let me remind you, is panned negatively in the press because it is the Jeep for women. You cannot make this stuff up, people. So, as much as y'all might hate this, we kinda do need diversity in car culture in order to keep it alive. Because as much as y'all want it to be a male-dominated enterprise, you are currently losing your most important factor in that equation, a new generation of men who couldn't give a fuck about driving a car. So yeah, the choice is yours. I know what I'm gonna keep doing. I am gonna keep being that weird trans freak who makes cars girly and sissy because hey, I would love to see more women find it fun and join in. And if no male is confident enough to join me, then y'all be a bunch of cowards and y'all deserve what y'all get. Alright, this video has gone on way too long. Thank you for watching. Tell your friends, particularly your feminine and LGBT friends, and I will see y'all in the next video.